Our main offering today is this modularizing approach to math teaching and learning. We're going to kind of look at a big picture planning template, think about some planning considerations when we go into a modularized approach. And then we're going to take some time to either plan individually or with partners, and then some time to exchange ideas with the whole group.
Watch your screen. The gray box that you see is going to disappear for about 3 seconds. You're going to see an image of some dots. When the gray box comes down, we're going to ask you to think about how many dots you saw. We can show the dots one additional time to kind of help you organize what you saw, and then we'll talk about what you saw and how you knew. Here goes the box. We're going to show the dots one more time so you can kind of organize what you saw the first time. If somebody would like to just tell me how many dots you saw, we'll just collect some ideas about how many there are first, and then we'll ask how you saw the dots. I heard 60, 48. A couple people saw 48. I heard a couple people say they saw 60. I see some 60s in the chat. All right, let's go ahead and get rid of the gray box, and let's think about how you saw it. Clearly, not everybody's number is going to be the right number, but we can think about what we thought we saw and how we use that idea. So who would like to talk about what they saw and how they worked out their number?
I saw 5 groups and 3 of them. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 25 times 3, 75.
Okay, so 5 groups, 5 dots in each one of those clusters. Yes, and that's a very common way that people see this. Perhaps a controversial cluster, maybe it should have been organized in the dice pattern for 4 so that it would be more clear what that cluster was. The second person who jumped in and said how they saw it, well, can you tell me again what you saw?
Okay, 3 sets containing 5 with each 5 having 4.
Okay, so you saw 5 groups of dots in each, and each of those groups of dots had 4, and so that made 60 altogether. This is just a quick way to think about engaging with some ideas about multiplication, engaging with some ideas about recognizing regular dot patterns. So there's kind of different entry points for thinking about this problem.
So thank you, Megan, for helping us engage in some mathematics and thinking about where Megan landed for us there was really looking at that 3 times 4 times 5. But where we began was we started with just what made sense to us and what we saw in the mathematics. And so we're going to connect that to this image here about what makes great math. And so the image of the stool over here is something that we have talked about as a team, and thinking about it as what we know is good about mathematics and math learning, whether we're in COVID times or even pre-COVID times, even post-COVID times. We know that conceptual understanding, being in the green print, really thinking deeply about mathematical concepts and knowing why they make sense in context and why they make sense in real life. And so we know that that grounds good mathematics. On top of that, we have connecting to procedures and skills. So we know that if we ground kids in deep conceptual knowledge, they can make connections to the procedural skills and build fluency that is more permanent, right? It belongs to them. It lives in them if it's grounded in that conceptual knowledge. And then the thing that we are all trying to get to happen as teachers, that blue part about application. How do we get our students to apply the things that we've helped them learn and help them understand in a novel situation? So regardless of the times, those 3 concepts are grounded in what's really good as far as research in mathematics. It's been shown over and over. So we're trying to stay grounded in that stool. And then in addition, we're thinking about, well, man, what's the context that you're teaching in? I think everybody's had a shift. Some people are switching to hybrid. Some people are going more hybrid than they were a week ago, right? It's just a constant flex. So always thinking about what's the context that I'm interacting with students in the current day, and thinking about how to get great mathematics there. And then finally, this third thing, our social emotional. We had a great conversation with a colleague the other day who said, you know, social emotional learning is something that teachers have always worried about. We're always aware of what's going on with their kids and how they're feeling and whether they're engaging and whether it's safe for them. What's different now is that we're all talking about it and it's on everybody's radar screen, right? It's kind of undeniable that we need to think about that on purpose. So these 3 boxes express where we're coming from and grounding. There's a lot more that makes great mathematics. And so we're going to invite you to share, what would you add to this? There's, our conceptual piece, our context, and our social emotional. What else would you say makes great mathematics? And so we want to take about a minute to give you some time to put that in the chat. So if you would think of one idea that makes great mathematics from your experiences here and your opinions, and we will read those out to kind of get a sense of what's great mathematics for us in this room, this community. Clear directions, discussion makes great mathematics. Interactions, totally, right? You don't want to do mathematics by yourself, and that's a challenge right now. Hands-on, pictures, equity and access, making sure that all students have the opportunity to access the learning. Visuals, repetition, right? We got to be able to see things a couple times, come back over that math path, making connections. So as we move forward and we think about kind of modularizing mathematics while staying grounded in what we know is good mathematics, right? We have what research says, but we also have what you say from your experiences of being in the classroom, right? Equity and access, discussion, interaction, the visuals. Keep those all in your mind as we move forward and we think about how to take the things that you're already doing and kind of shift them into a modularized way of thinking about planning. All right, thank you. Thank you for participating in the chat.
The next thing we're going to put into the chat is this planning for math, a modularized approach. And I wanted to give you just a little bit of the background of where this is coming from. This is one approach to thinking about modularization of mathematics and kind of how we as a team started kind of wrapping our brain around how planning in the mathematics classroom might look different, might feel different, sound different, and kind of how we pivot for those things so that we hit all the points that Michelle was just talking about and that you were adding into the chat. So we're going to take some time unpacking this together, and then we're going to take a little bit more time in some breakout rooms, either individually or with some partners, kind of digging into it for yourself as well. So I think we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. One of the biggest conversations, and this was Michelle and I, that we had to have when we were thinking about how would we approach this semester ahead of us, or how would we do this in our own classrooms, is we had to let go in this modularized approach of that one lesson per day paradigm. Instead of planning one lesson per day and then we have our week, it was this planning for sections, right? Or you can call them units, right? 1 to 2 units. And thinking about how students enter in flexibly to those different activities and how they meet those learning goals with some flexibility in their time to do so as well. So it's kind of a mindset shift when we were thinking about planning for modularized instruction. The other thing, and this came from the world of online teaching, from folks that have been doing online teaching for a long time, is this idea that you already have your entire semester laid out from the beginning, right? You know the due dates, you know kind of the rhythm and the flow of the class before that student ever logs in for online instruction. Or if you have a hybrid approach, you have those things already laid out. What's going to be done face-to-face when I have kids in the classroom? What am I offering to my students that are only getting this information virtually? So all of that, those little Post-it notes, I mean, you could put the red yarn in the pins too. It all has to be connected. And so it's kind of a big shift for most of us who have been teaching in the classroom for a long time. It's letting go of that lesson per day, and it's really having everything planned up front. So one of the resources that really helped us think about it was this resource that had these repeating steps. And we liked that repetition. We found that very useful because when you know what to expect and there's that repetition, your anxiety level goes down, right? And if your students know what to expect, their anxiety goes down. So for hybrid thinking, the work that students do is in these 3 repeating steps. They explore, they play, they discuss. There's a deep dive into some mathematical content, and then we come back out for that synthesize and apply. And if you've worked with other curriculums, or if you've worked in the classroom, in the math classroom for a long time, you know, we talked in as a group that it felt like that launch, explore, summary, right? Something that's familiar to us. It's those 3 repeating stages over and over again. But again, not lesson by lesson, but as a unit, as a section of learning, about 1 to 2 weeks. So I'm going to take a moment here and let's just look at this slide. I want you to see, what do you notice and what do you wonder about these 3 repeating steps? And if you'd like to add those ideas into the chat, you're more than welcome to, or you can just kind of have that as an observation for yourself. So let's take about 1 minute to put what you notice and what you wonder about those 3 repeating steps. Just noticing a routine, thank you. We're going to continue to work with this document. Again, we're going to go into some small groups for you to unpack it a little bit more. One of the curtains that I want to push back is to be very aware of the color is purposeful with this. And so know when you see those colors that anything in purple is something that could be done synchronously or asynchronously. It can be done when you have your students with you, or you can assign it and have parent or caregiver or peers do those activities as well. So the orange is what you're going to prioritize when you have your students synchronously, whether face-to-face or online. And the purple, you have a little bit more flexibility with. So those are those spaces where you can play a little bit more, and you can also have students discuss with peers or with caregivers those mathematical contents and ideas.
Ali, I want to build on what you just said there just a bit in that orange piece. So the orange piece also connects back to our stool, that 3-legged stool, and that orange is really an opportunity to think about, what do my students need to know conceptually? We want to take advantage of learning conceptual ideas when they're together and they can talk about it, where they can interact and have discussion along the other things that you all said made great mathematics. So just to make that connect, it wasn't clear for me, and it was a big mindset shift for me.
We know too that you can't buy on your curriculum alone, right? So you always are adding those pieces that you've built and you've gathered over the years, or you've learned from a colleague, that dice game that you just love to do, right? So there's continuous ongoing practice that you also need to include and incorporate into your unit and modularized planning. And then also some anytime resources, right, that are going to be handy for you as you plan. So anytime resources we love, right? Because you can use them anytime. There's some examples there for K5 and 612. That's my wheelhouse. I love the 3-act math, the Dan Meyer, and my elementary friends have introduced me to Graham Fletcher. So those were kind of my go-tos when I needed a little something extra, a little push. I'm wondering from you all, this is another opportunity to say something. If you could share in the chat, what are the additional learning experiences that support your math goals in your classroom, whether virtual, hybrid, or face-to-face? And would you share those anytime resources with us now in the chat? It's kind of like, you know, when you used to line up your kids, what were the things that you did to keep them entertained in that line, right? You know, so it's like those anytime, you can do them on the fly, a good textbook, right? With rich mathematical tasks. Math snacks, yep. Skip counting, absolutely. We started with the grounding and what makes great math. We moved into kind of how our mindset has shifted over the course of the last year as educators, right? And how we need to think differently about planning and planning for and pivoting for multiple modes of instruction. And then now we've dug a little deeper into kind of how that's going to work, like what's our routine and structure. And just a reminder, this is one offering. We know that you might have a curriculum that has a really great structure and is working well for you. This is simply another offering for you to have as a tool in your tool belt. So now Megan is going to walk us through the process of kind of how she planned by using this process, a modularization approach for a multiplication unit.
If we take a look at this graphic organizer, it's organized around the components that we just looked at. And so if we start with explore and play, I used to teach 3rd grade. And so if this was kind of close to the beginning of the year, we would be starting a multiplication unit. And I'm thinking about developing a couple of weeks of multiplication instruction. In my explore and play, I might start with some just go-to games that I am familiar with that support multiplication. And in this kind of planning, I might want to try and have a tech option and a no tech option so that kids who don't have technology have a way to engage here. So circles and stars would be a no tech multiplication game. These are games that kids can play to just engage with the ideas of multiplication. They don't really have to know what multiplication is to do this. So it's a great place to open this module. I used to do a read aloud for multiplication using the book Each Orange Has 8 Slices. It's possible that I could assign that to have students do on YouTube. I love doing read alouds in person, but if it needs to be done in an asynchronous kind of setting, the kids could watch that video on YouTube. This is a place where you would just use your favorite activities and kind of things that you use to introduce a particular unit. In the deep dive, I'm really going to rely on resources from my curriculum, and I'm going to try and think about, this is when I'm going to be working with students together. We're going to be working at the same time, and I really want to emphasize discourse and discussion, problem solving, and exploring ideas together. And I might be thinking about how I can consolidate lessons. I might be thinking about whether I need to revise particular lessons to really emphasize key content. And then in my synthesize and apply, I might be thinking about, again, more games that kids could play. At this point, I might be introducing games that rely more on conceptual knowledge of multiplication. I might think of some project kinds of things that they could do at home to kind of continue to think about multiplication ideas and things that they could do at home and bring together or give to me. And then if I drop down to the ongoing practice, here I'm just thinking about an independent project that I could assign to kids. I might think about materials from my textbook, like workbook pages. Some textbooks have project assignments. I might think about asynchronous resources that I use. This would be a place where I might create some Desmos lessons that kids could do on their own, a Flipgrid assignment that kids could upload. And then in my anytime resources, I'm really thinking about games that kind of start to really get kids grounded in multiplication, really deepen their understanding, games that they can play on their own, activities that I might ordinarily do in centers, but these could also be activities that could be done independently. And then what are those online resources, 3-act lessons? And this is just a way to kind of think about that organization that Allie took us through and put it into an organizer so that I can start filling in some of my ideas about the unit that I'm moving into.
It really helped us out. And then Megan really brought it to light for us when she was like, let's see if I can, use this to plan, and really came up with that template. So hope that it gives some vision and things to think about in your own resource. But what we're going to do now is give you some time to think about this template on your own. So you're going to join a breakout room that suits your needs right now. You might be the person that says, I need some individual time to think. That's your first bubble. So we're going to open up breakout rooms that you can choose. And so if you want to be an individual time, go to individual time. The other breakout rooms are going to be collaborative thinking time by grade bands. We're coming back to talk about what were people sharing, right? Is there something that they're excited about, or are there questions that you're wondering about you want to put out? And I noticed what Allie's putting in the chat, routine and structure, right? When it's in place, our anxiety goes away. We know what to do. It's one of the best things you can do for your L students, right? For your new students, just to say, I know what's going to happen next.
I'm going to take 30 seconds to land right here just to let you know where we got our routine and structure. And it comes from Illustrative Mathematics. And so they're the ones that kind of put forth this modularized approach for their curriculum specifically that we've adapted for our purposes for this meeting together. And if you don't know Illustrative Mathematics, it does have K through high school, but the K through 5 is in its beta, which means it's not fully out yet unless you're part of the pilot program. But grades 6 through 8, their Algebra 1, their Algebra 2, and their geometry curriculum is all on the New Mexico PED high quality instructional materials. So even if it's not your curriculum, it might be a great anytime resource for you. So we wanted to make sure that we shared that information with you. And you can, if you join the community hub, access some of those elementary materials and resources. So that might be a motivation for you. It has curriculum resources, community posts, and also specifically distance learning. And I assume kind of the way that they think, that they might be moving into some hybrid learning resources as well as the educational landscape shifts again. The last link down there is to get to the IM blog, which is another great resource just for general information and also math specific information. So they've got some really great authors of some articles on that blog. So it might be one for you to check out. We thank you so much for joining us. It's great and learning with you.
Thank you for being here. See you next time.
Thanks for being at school with the kids, friends. Keep on swimming.